In the late summer of 1590, Governor John White stepped onto the shores of Roanoke, expecting to hear life voices, tools, laughter. Instead, there was nothing. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just an empty settlement frozen in time. The houses still stood. The gates were intact, and carved into a single wooden post, one word, a message no one could explain, because what it pointed to was something they were never supposed to find. For over 4 centuries, the disappearance of the Roanoke colony has stood as one of the most unsettling mysteries in American history. In 1587, 115 English settlers, men, women, and children, arrived on a remote island off the coast of what is now North Carolina. It was England's first serious attempt to establish a permanent foothold in the New World. But survival was never guaranteed. Supplies ran low. Tensions with local tribes simmered, and with winter approaching, their leader, John White, made a desperate decision. He sailed back to England for help. He was supposed to return within months. Instead, war with Spain delayed him for 3 years. By the time he finally came back in 1590, the colony was gone, not destroyed, not abandoned in chaos, just gone. No graves, no remains, no signs of violence. Only that single word, Croatoan. For generations, this mystery became a blank canvas for speculation. Massacre, starvation, secret evacuation, even supernatural explanations. But now, new evidence suggests the truth wasn't a disappearance at all. It was a transformation. For more than 400 years, the fate of the Roanoke settlers has remained one of history's most haunting unanswered questions. How does an entire colony, 115 people, vanish without leaving behind a single body, a single weapon, or even a clear sign of panic? Theories filled the silence. Some claimed they were massacred by hostile tribes. Others believed Spanish forces wiped them out to eliminate a rival presence. There were even darker ideas: starvation, madness, or something far less explainable. But every theory shared the same problem. There was no evidence. No battlefield, no mass grave, no physical proof of any of it. And then there was the word. Croatoan. Carved deliberately into the wood, not scratched in desperation, not hidden, left in plain sight, almost like a message. But a message to who? And more importantly, why only one word? For centuries, historians treated it as a clue that led nowhere, a fragment of a story that had already ended. But what if that assumption was wrong? What if the settlers didn't vanish in fear, but left behind a message because they knew exactly where they were going? The breakthrough didn't begin in the dirt. It began with a map. In 2012, researchers examining a 16th-century map drawn by John White noticed something strange. Under specialized lighting, a hidden symbol emerged, buried beneath a patch of paper. It was the outline of a fort. Its location, roughly 50 miles inland. This matched a cryptic note from White himself, written before he left in 1587, where he mentioned plans to move the colony 50 miles into the Maine. Suddenly, the idea of relocation wasn't speculation, it was documented intent. Archaeologists shifted focus to this inland region, known today as Site X. What they found changed everything. Fragments of English pottery, Elizabethan-era ceramics, objects that didn't belong to any later settlement. And just as important, what they didn't find. No tobacco pipes. A detail that sounds trivial until you realize Jamestown settlers, just decades later, left them everywhere. Their absence placed these artifacts firmly before 1607. But the evidence didn't stop there. At a second site, why similar artifacts appeared. 2 separate inland locations, same time period, same cultural signature. This wasn't a random trace. It was movement. But the inland sites only told half the story. Because while one group may have moved into the forests, another clue had been sitting in plain sight since 1590. Croatoan wasn't just a word. It was a place, a real location, an island to the south, known today as Hatteras. And more importantly, it was home to a friendly native tribe the colonists already knew. For centuries, local oral traditions claimed the settlers never disappeared at all. They joined the Croatoan people, lived with them, became part of them. Historians dismiss these accounts as folklore. But recent excavations are forcing a reevaluation. On Hatteras Island, archaeologists uncovered a site where European artifacts and native tools were found mixed together in the same layers, in the same spaces. Not traded, not separated, lived with. A rusted rapier hilt, English metal, native pottery, side by side. This wasn't a battlefield. It was a shared settlement. Now the narrative begins to fracture. If some colonists moved inland, and others integrated along the coast, then Roanoke didn't end in a single event. It split. The answer that's emerging from the evidence is not what anyone expected. The Roanoke colonists didn't vanish. They adapted. Faced with starvation, isolation, and the realization that help wasn't coming, they made a calculated decision. They split into groups. One moved inland, attempting to establish a more sustainable settlement. The other turned toward the coast, toward the Croatoan, seeking alliance, protection, and survival. And over time, they didn't remain outsiders. They became part of the world around them. This isn't just supported by artifacts, it's now backed by genetics. Modern DNA studies have linked living families in the region to 16th century English lineages, including surnames recorded on the original Roanoke Manifest. A biological bridge across 4 centuries. The colony wasn't lost, it was absorbed. But here's the twist, this wasn't a temporary survival tactic. It was permanent. They didn't return, they didn't rebuild an English colony. They let it go. Which means the real story of Roanoke isn't about disappearance. It's about the moment a group of colonists stopped being colonists altogether. The story of Roanoke is far more profound than a simple unsolved mystery. It challenges one of the deepest assumptions we hold about history, that early colonies either succeeded or failed. Roanoke did neither. It transformed. For centuries, we framed this as a disappearance because we were looking for the wrong outcome. We expected a fort, a flag, a continuation of English identity. When we didn't find it, we assumed something went wrong. But nothing went wrong. They survived, just not in the way history was prepared to recognize. Stripped of supplies, leadership, and certainty, they made a choice most colonial narratives ignore. They didn't try to dominate the land. They adapted to it. They learned from the people already there. They integrated. They changed. And in doing so, they erased the very markers we were searching for. We spent 400 years looking for a vanished colony, when in reality, we were looking at the aftermath of a successful escape from the identity they arrived with. The story of Roanoke doesn't just belong to the past, it forces a question about the present. We like to believe that survival means control. That strength comes from holding onto identity, systems, and structures no matter the cost. But Roanoke suggests something far more uncomfortable. What if survival sometimes requires letting those things go? Today, we live in a world built on rigid systems, nations, economies, cultures we assume are permanent. But history shows they are. When pressure builds climate, conflict, scarcity, those systems don't always collapse in fire and chaos. Sometimes they dissolve quietly. People adapt, they migrate, they integrate, they become something new. And from the outside, it can look like disappearance. But from the inside, it's survival. Roanoke forces us to reconsider what it means to endure, not as preservation, but as transformation. Because the real mystery isn't how they vanished. It's whether we would recognize survival. If it didn't look like us anymore? If the Roanoke colonists didn't disappear, but chose to become something new, what does that say about how we define survival today? Do you think they made the right decision, or lost something essential in the process? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories that challenge what we think we know about history, subscribe and join me in uncovering what was never meant to be seen.